You know, they say you never really know a person until you see how they treat a waiter. But I've got a different theory. You never know a person until you see how they react to a 1978 Ford F-250 parked in a driveway that's slightly too nice for it. I didn't think a rusted piece of American steel would be the catalyst for a suburban war. That nearly cost me my sanity, my savings, and my freedom. But looking back now, sitting on this porch with a lukewarm beer, I realize it wasn't about the truck. It never is. It was about control. Specifically, the kind of control a woman like Linda craves more than oxygen. Linda was the HOA president of Quail Run, a title she wore like it was a five-star general's rank, patrolling the streets in her silent electric sedan like a shark in a heated pool, just waiting for a blade of grass to step out of line so she could strike. I moved into Quail Run about 8 months after my dad passed, using the inheritance to put a down payment on a place that was honestly too big for a single guy like me. But I wanted the garage, a 3-car beauty where I could finally finish the restoration on Dad's truck, the Blue Beast, the only tangible thing I had left of him besides his stubbornness and a box of old tools. I remember the first day I met her. I was unloading boxes, sweating through my t-shirt, and she just materialized at the end of the driveway, clutching a clipboard like a weapon, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was one of those tight, practiced smiles that says I'm watching you rather than welcome to the neighborhood. She didn't introduce herself with a handshake, no. She just tapped the clipboard with a manicured nail and said, "We have rules about commercial vehicles, Mr. Hayes," pointing at the Blue Beast, which was, admittedly, looking rough with its primer patches and missing bumper, and I just laughed, wiping grease on a rag, telling her it wasn't commercial, it was a family heirloom, a project. Something to keep my hands busy so my mind didn't drift to dark places. She didn't like that answer. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the truck like it was a contagious disease, and she just hummed a low, vibrating sound of disapproval before turning on her heel and walking away without another word. And in that moment, I felt the air pressure drop, the way it does right before a tornado touches down. For the first month, it was quiet to quiet, just the occasional letter in the mailbox about aesthetic violations, which I ignored because, hey, I was unpacking, I was grieving, and honestly, who cares if my trash can was visible from the street for 20 minutes after the truck left? But then the fines started escalating, not just for the trash can, but for things I didn't even know existed. A grease stain on the driveway the size of a quarter, a porch light that was too warm of a color temperature, and of course, the truck. I tried to play nice, I really did. I went to the monthly meeting held in the community center, which smelled like stale coffee and judgment, and I tried to explain to the board that the truck was under a tarp, that it wasn't an eyesore, it was history. But Linda sat at the head of the table, staring at me over her rimless glasses, interrupting me every time I took a breath to cite Article 4, Section C regarding blight and neighborhood cohesion. She humiliated me in front of 20 neighbors, painting me as this grease monkey transient who was single-handedly tanking their property values. And I saw the way the others looked at me, not with hate, but with fear, because they knew if they sided with me, they'd be next on her list. That night, walking back to my house, feeling the heat of anger rising up my neck, I saw her car slow down as it passed me, the window rolling down just an inch, and she said, soft and sweet like poison, "It would be a shame if we had to put a lien on your home over a piece of junk, Mr. Hayes. Maybe you belong in a trailer park." And that was it. That was the moment the switch flipped. It wasn't about the fines anymore. It was about the disrespect. The assumption that because I work with my hands and drive an old truck, I'm somehow less than her, less deserving of space in her precious manufactured utopia. The escalation was swift and brutal. She started hiring private towing companies to patrol specifically for my truck, meaning I had to park it inside the garage, which forced me to park my daily driver outside, which she then fined for excessive street parking, creating this impossible loop where I was losing to $100 a week just to exist in my own home. But the breaking point, the night that really set the stage for what I'm about to tell you, happened during a thunderstorm in late October. I was in the garage, sanding down the fender of the Blue Beast, listening to the rain hammer the roof, feeling close to my dad when I heard a screech of metal outside. I ran out to find a tow truck hooking up my daily driver my way to work, and Linda was standing there in a yellow raincoat, holding an umbrella over the tow driver, pointing at my tire, which was literally one single inch over the curb line onto the grass. I lost it. I stormed out there, rain soaking me instantly, shouting at the driver to drop it. And Linda just stepped in front of him, blocking me, her face illuminated by the lightning, looking absolutely manic, screaming that I was destroying the sod, that I was a menace, and I remember getting right in her face, not touching her, never touching her but close enough to see the rainwater dripping off her nose, and I said, "You are going to regret this, Linda. You are going to wish you never looked in my direction." And she just laughed, a high, cackling sound that mixed with the thunder, and said, "I have the bylaws, the board, and the lawyers. You have nothing but a rusted truck and a dirty mouth." And she watched with a smile as they dragged my car away, leaving me standing in the mud, soaking wet, shivering not from cold, but from a rage so pure it felt like it could burn the house down. I went inside, dried off, and sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey, staring at the stack of violation notices, the legal threats, the liens. She was already filing against my deed, and I realized she was right. I couldn't beat her playing her game because she wrote the rules. She controlled the board, and she had an infinite budget for pettiness. I needed to change the game entirely. I needed to stop thinking like a mechanic trying to fix a broken engine and start thinking like a demolition expert, looking for the structural weak point in a building. I spent the next 3 weeks doing nothing but research. I went to the county clerk's office. I dug through archives that smelled like vinegar and old dust. I pulled the original plat maps from 1985, the geological surveys, the environmental impact reports from before the subdivision was even built. I became a ghost in the neighborhood. I stopped arguing. I paid the fines without a word. I parked my truck 3 blocks away and walked home in the rain just to deny her the satisfaction of seeing it, and I think she thought she had won. She thought she had broken me, because I saw her strutting past my house with that smug look of victory, checking her clipboard, probably planning which shrub of mine to attack next. But she didn't know what I had found in the basement of the county record's office. Sandwiched between a zoning permit for a strip mall and a drainage assessment, I found a discrepancy. A tiny, clerical error made 30 years ago by a surveyor who was probably in a rush to get home to dinner. A line on a map that was drawn 3 degrees off true north. It didn't look like much, just a squiggly line on blue paper. But when I overlaid it with the current home map, the one Linda worshipped like a Bible, my heart nearly stopped beating. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a landmine. According to the original deed, the common area park behind our house is Linda's pride and joy, where she hosted her exclusive garden parties and where she had built a massive, unauthorized gazebo dedicated to herself. Wasn't common area at all, due to the shifting of the creek bed over 30 years and that survey error. A pie-shaped slice of that land, extending 40 feet back and cutting right through her beloved gazebo and her immaculate rose garden, actually belonged to the property I had bought. But I needed to be sure. I couldn't just walk up to her with a map. I needed undeniable, concrete proof, so I hired an independent surveyor, a heavy-set guy named Rick, who had been doing this for 40 years and hated HOA letters almost as much as I did. I told Rick to come at dawn, before Linda's patrol, and when he set up his tripod and lasers, I held my breath, watching him work, watching him check the coordinates, check them, and then check them a 3rd time, scratching his head. He looked at me, then looked at the gazebo, then back at his equipment, and a slow grin spread across his face, the kind of grin a wolf gives when the sheep gate is left open. "Son," he said, spitting on the ground, "you see that fancy white lattice fence she's got up? You see that gazebo with the bronze plaque? It's sitting smack dab on your dirt, about 12 feet deep into your property line." I felt a rush of adrenaline so intense I almost passed out. Not only was she trespassing, but every fine she had levied against me for encroaching on common areas was legally void, because she was the one encroaching on my private property. But I didn't want to just win. I wanted to destroy the tyranny she had built. I wanted to make sure she could never terrorize another person again, so I didn't say a word. I waited for the annual HOA block party, which was scheduled for the following Saturday. It was the biggest event of the year, catered, with a live band, held right there in the common area park, right under the gazebo that was sitting on my land. I spent the next few days gathering materials not for a lawsuit, not yet, but for a physical statement, something that would be seared into the memory of every resident in Quail Run. I bought industrial-grade caution tape, private property signs, and this was the kicker: I rented a heavy-duty jackhammer. The morning of the party arrived. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and Linda was in her element. Direct that did drag us all through the mud, and let me tell you, mud fights are a lot less fun when lawyers are involved and the mud is made of deposition papers and cease and desist orders. You'd think watching her gazebo collapse would be the end of it. A clear victory, roll credits. But people like Linda don't operate on logic, they operate on spite. The Monday after the gazebo incident, as the neighborhood had dubbed it, I was served with a lawsuit so thick it could have stopped a bullet. She wasn't just suing me for destruction of property, she was suing me for emotional distress, harassment, and get this, diminution of community value. She claimed that by reclaiming my land, I had ruined the aesthetic flow of the neighborhood, and therefore owed the HOA meaning her $300,000. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office. His name was Dave, a guy I went to high school with who usually handled dues and divorces, not complex real estate wars, and he was sweating. "Mike," he said, loosening his tie, "she's got a shark of a lawyer from the city. They're arguing that even if the land is yours, the doctrine of adverse possession might apply because the HOA has been using it openly for 20 years. If they win, not only do you lose the land, you pay for the gazebo you smashed." My stomach dropped. Adverse possession, squatters' rights. Basically, if you let someone use your land long enough, it becomes theirs. I felt like I was back in the rain watching my car get towed helpless. But here's the thing about bullies: they always overreach. While Dave was panicking about the law, I went back to the history. I remembered something from the county archives, a small detail I had glossed over because I was so focused on the property lines. I went back to the records office, digging into the environmental permits from the 90s, and there it was, a protected wetland buffer agreement. When the developers built Quail Run, they had to agree to leave a specific corridor of land untouched to protect the drainage into the creek, a corridor that overlapped almost perfectly with the common area and my reclaimed backyard. This meant two things. One, I couldn't build on it either. But two, and this was the silver bullet, the HOA was never legally allowed to manicure it, landscape it, or build a gazebo on it in the first place by turning a wild buffer zone into a rose garden. Linda hadn't just trespassed on my land, she had violated federal environmental protection agreements. Adverse possession doesn't apply if the use of the land was illegal to begin with. You can't claim ownership of something you were breaking the law to use. I didn't tell Dave. I didn't tell anyone. I waited for the deposition. Imagine a sterile conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing. Linda is sitting there in a power suit, looking smug, her high-priced lawyer smirking at Dave. They went on for hours, grilling me, trying to make me look like an unstable, violent neighbor. "Mr. Hayes, did you or did you not enjoy destroying the community gathering place?" her lawyer asked. I leaned forward, looked Linda in the eye, and slid a single piece of paper across the table, the copy of the Federal Wetland Covenant. "I didn't destroy a community gathering place," I said, my voice steady. "I removed an illegal structure from a federally protected wetland buffer, and actually, I'm obligated by law to restore this land to its natural state," which means I turned to Linda, whose smirk was trembling. "All those non-native roses, the sod, the sprinkler system, it all has to go, and since the HOA installed it, the HOA pays for the restoration. Oh, and the EPA. I already sent them the photos." The silence in that room was louder than the jackhammer. Linda's lawyer picked up the paper, read it, turned pale, and whispered something in her ear. Linda stood up, slamming her hands on the table. "You're lying. You're just a hateful little man." But it was over. The color of the law is black and white, but the color of environmental fines is green, lots of green. the EPA didn't joke around. They slapped the HOA with a massive fine for 2 decades of wetland destruction. The board panicked. They held an emergency meeting without Linda and voted to oust her immediately to try and save face. But the damage was done. To pay the fines and the restoration costs, the whole fees had to triple. And guess who everyone blamed? Not me. They blamed the woman who had spent their money building illegal shrines to herself. But the real victory wasn't the legal win. It happened about 3 months later. I was in my garage, finally working on the Blue Beast in peace. The garage door was open. I looked out and saw a moving truck parked in front of Linda's house. She was moving, downsizing. Rumor had it, to a condo 2 towns over. She walked out to her car, carrying a box, and stopped. She looked at my house. I walked out to the end of the driveway, wiping my hands on a rag. Just like the first day we met, we locked eyes. There was no smugness left in her, just a tired, bitter defeat. I didn't gloat. I didn't flip her off. I just nodded, a simple, mechanic's nod. She looked away, got in her silent electric car, and drove off. Now, looking at my backyard, it's a mess of tall native grasses and wild bushes. It's not pretty by HOA standards. It looks wild. But it's mine, and the Blue Beast, she's running like a dream. Sometimes I drive it through the neighborhood, the exhaust rumbling a little too loud, and the neighbors wave. They wave because they know the monster has been slain. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the question I want to leave you with. Was I right? I mean, really, I destroyed a nice garden. I caused my neighbors' fees to go up even. If it was technically Linda's fault, I used the heavy hand of the federal government to crush an old lady who just wanted a pretty neighborhood. Some of the neighbors, the ones who really loved that gazebo, they still look at me sideways. They say I went too far, that I could have just let it go. That being technically right doesn't make you a good neighbor. So, you tell me, was this justice? Or did I just become exactly what I hated, a guy using the rule book to ruin someone else's day because of a personal grudge? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because honestly, sometimes when I look at that overgrown swamp in my backyard, I wonder if I won the war but lost the peace. Stay safe out there and keep your property lines marked.